Welcome to Later Days. I'm your host, Craig Judkins at the Electric Eel in Karlsruhe, Germany. Our theme this week for our cocktail delivery service is New York City. So we thought, how appropriate would it be to give you a little bit of a late night talk show here inside the Eel. And to that end, I have my special guest and one-man house band, Chris Cacavas. And Chris, you might know him from Green on Red. He was touring all over the world in the 1980s. And to put it clearly how important his band was, I've been told that if you owned a serious record shop and you didn't have any Green on Red records in your shop, you weren't a serious record shop. So they were quite interesting, and I'll tell you a little bit more of a story about that a little bit later. These days, Chris is touring with Dream Syndicate, a New York City band, which tidily fits into our theme. New York City as a whole is something I think that exists in people's mind. Those who've been there understand. But those who haven't, this is more for you. If you really can't quite imagine what it's like until you immerse yourself in something like that. There are other big cities, sure, Tokyo, Hong Kong, London, all of those places, but New York City has a certain kind of charm to it, has a certain electricity. I can tell you that when I was a kid, at just 21 years old, I was going to an advertising seminar as I was advertising major, and I showed up there. And there was a guy on the plane who was an airlines pilot, and he could see that I was so green and so unprepared for what I was about to encounter, trying to just simply get from the airport in Queens to my hotel in Midtown Manhattan. He went with me. He could tell. I don't know, you assume when you hear stories about New York City that you're just going to immediately just step out and get shot, murdered, stabbed, whatever. And this is, 25 years ago or so. So this is a little bit different time before the cleanup of Times Square and Giuliani and all that kind of stuff. Or maybe it was around that time. But it was something I wasn't prepared for. Thank God this guy chaperoned me right to the door of my hotel and then like an angel just disappeared. Later that night we went out drinking to celebrate being in the Big Apple. Like it was so exciting, we're there. We're imagining our lives in the future. We're imagining, what if we ended up being advertising executive people here making money and we're the ones taking these limos and, we're the Mad Men kind of guys. Oh my God, that'd be so much. So we went out and we thought, we're going to spend every single dime that we brought with us. New York City is the most expensive city in the world. It's what we're telling ourselves. They're just going to reach in and take the money out of our pockets when we walk through the door. My parents had told us on the way, you're going to get mugged. Everything. Bad stories. We didn't pay for a drink that night. We went there. All the people, the door guys didn't charge us to get in. The bar that we went to is called Who's on Third at 83rd and 3rd. It's like a reference to some old Who's on Third, it's kind of a joke. And it was just outside of what we expected. I don't know what anybody else experienced in New York City is, but it is a magical place. It's wonderful. I've been back several times and I've had lots of different experiences, but generally on the whole, very positive. I really like the place. So we're going to do a break right now for a word from our sponsors.
We don't have a sponsor.
Okay, we're going to take a break anyway, and when we come back, Chris is going to play us a little tune, and then we're going to sit down, have a word with him, and then he's going to play us a little tune. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm your host, Craig Judkins. This is Later Days. So Chris, you're drinking the Downtown in Brooklyn, which is a drink that Malta came up with. Back in the days, we used to tinker around with these various Negroni variations. And that one is one that he came up with: rye whiskey, Mondino, and the Red Rouge, Quinquina Rouge.
It's quite tasty.
Yeah, it is quite tasty. So we named it after the Downtown in Brooklyn. You see those signs in the subway in Manhattan. So that was the name that sprung to us. So we're reintroduced it here for the next couple of weeks while we do the New York theme. We're also doing Rockaway Beach Surf Club.
Ooh.
We're doing a drink, classic variation called the Red Hook.
Okay.
They came up with it, Milk and Honey, in 2003, I think. It's my favorite, actually. And then the New York Sour, which is whiskey sour with a red wine float.
I'm very curious about that cocktail.
Yeah, it's
very
you put it in we served it in a jar because we said, how can you serve this drink? It needs to be served with a foamy head on it to have the red wine float. And we just decided to put it in a jar and let the people put the ingredients in, shake it themselves, add some ice, red wine float, and there you go.
I like that you went the extra distance to make it vegan. Yeah.
We made it vegan
Yeah.
because otherwise you got to use an egg white, and how the hell are you going to do that? You got an egg in there. But we stopped using eggs here anyway because the aquafaba from the chickpeas.
Right.
I think it's as good of a foaming agent, and you don't have all this salmonella poisoning problem going on, which is a plus. And we can say we're vegan, which we've done with a lot of our food as well, just because the mess and the cleanup, and if something spoils that's vegan, it's not as bad if it spoils if there's beef in it or something like that.
Yeah.
So tell me, on the subject of New York City, since that's what we're talking about, what has been some of your experience? Like, you live here in Laugensteinbach, or you did, and then you moved out but you're moving around kind of the outer skirts of the city. You don't live in the middle of Karlsruhe. And not that this is anything like Manhattan or Brooklyn or whatever, but what is it that you can tell me about when you end up in New York City? What strikes you when that happens compared to here?
Well, I was born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. So I grew up in the desert, the landscape is pretty much like the moon, I imagine. Then I moved to Los Angeles, which was a fantastic experience when I was 18 years old. And about a few years later, I was on tour with my band Green on Red, and we went to New York for the first time. And it just blew my mind, I mean, just mostly the architecture at that time was a thing that is just incredible and overwhelming. And I never, at that time in the 80s, when I was around 21, about the same time you went there for the first time, I didn't spend much time there. It was pretty much get in and out, play the gig, go, but I always loved the vibe, and it was a magical city. That sounds cliche,
but you're talking about sitting in a window and watching the flow of humanity in front of you.
Yeah, that happened. I was at a bar. This is after I lived in Germany, and then I went back there and spent a week working with Steve Wynn, recording, blah blah blah. And I was sitting during the day in a bar with a beer, looking out at all the people just walking by, and it moved me. It really moved me, and I realized what I missed about the big city after living in the village where nothing happens.
The village in Germany.
Right, the village in Germany, exactly. And I just love that you can pretty much have anything, any time of the day. Whether you want to go shopping, whether you want to get a beer at 4 a.m, a takeaway beer on the street, if you want to eat Mexican food or any
it will be good Mexican food.
Some of the best.
Yeah.
Some of the best I've eaten. And from every region in Mexico, there's a restaurant offering that type of food.
It's amazing.
Whether it's Nicaraguan, Yucatan, Nicaragua, Yucatan, you know what I'm talking about, Oaxaca, it doesn't matter. There's every niche of Mexican food there.
So in terms of New York City and the kinds of music that came out of the Lower East Side, let's say, in the late 70s and the early 80s, when people could afford to live there because the city had just rotten down to nothing. Which bands that were playing there sort of were inspiring you at the time when you were writing music and when you guys were playing together in Green on Red? Was there anybody that was lighting you up? That was a New York band?
Absolutely. The bands that impressed us the most, I think, not only me, but like the entire band, bands like Television with their record Marquee Moon, unbelievable, an absolute masterpiece. And it was a sound that was just like nothing I ever heard before. The Ramones, fantastic, unbelievable. Richard Hell and the Voidoids, just mind-blowing stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
That's the blank generation, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Richard Hell, and we loved this stuff, and it was so foreign to us, and it was so not California.
Yeah.
It's like a sound that came from only New York.
And do you think that was somehow a reaction to what was going on in California? That there was this individual voice rising up out of the city?
Well, I think that certainly bands in New York were watching bands in Los Angeles and vice versa. And, you know, it did become sort of a, how do I say
Like
it?
a competition or something?
Yeah, kind of coagulated somewhere in the middle, but not really, because California always had that California sound. In New York, you know, they were very dedicated to what they do, you know.
Yeah.
It's funny, I think it has a lot to do with the environment and the weather, you know, that adds to
And the living conditions and just the reality of everyday life.
Absolutely.
Like I talked to my friend of mine who I interview, which will be on the Electric Eel website, Vincent Marino, and I said, somebody told me that you can't be lazy in New York City. And it just, you have bills to pay, you have things you have to take care of.
Yeah.
You probably have roommates if you're living in a place, if you're living anywhere in Manhattan or anything like that, and even in Brooklyn and places where the rent is just so high compared to where you might live in the Midwest or wherever, and you have to get out there and earn your money, and you have to grind. He said also that you just open the window and you see this flow of humanity like you were talking about.
Yeah.
He said you feel guilty for just sitting on your ass because you got to get out there and you got to get yourself into it and experience it. Yeah, that's great. It is again like the third time we've said it now. It's quite a magical place, I think.
Yeah.
You gonna play a song for us?
I'd be happy to. I don't really have anything New York themed, but
How about California?
yeah, well, you know, land of the lotus eaters.
Yeah,
As they say.
Let's hear it.
All right, let's do it.
This is Chris Cacavas. Cacavas.
Should I just jump into it?
Jump in.
Something's spreading ear to ear. It's not a smile, it's my greatest fear. All said and done, make sure it is. But there's a lot that I won't miss, 'cause the sky's not falling. It's California. Into the ocean, into the ocean. The sky's not falling. It's California. Into the ocean, into the ocean. I jumped a bit, broke the bridle. I had to tell you about something title. Your hands are shaking, and so's your head. Your lips are trembling, your eyes are red, but the sky's not falling. California, into the ocean, into the ocean. The sky's not falling. It's California, into the ocean, into the ocean. Is it a rumor or just a wish that all is lost because of this? Now hold your breath and close your eyes. It took me by surprise. I didn't realize that the sky's not falling. It's California into the ocean, into the ocean. The sky's not falling, falling, falling. It's California into the ocean, into the ocean.
Chris Cacavas, that was California. Check him out on Bandcamp. Make sure to check out electriceelcafe.de's website for our web shop. The New York drinks we're delivering this week for the next couple of weeks anyway, in the theme of New York City. And check out our website under electriceel.de/themes for our themes going forward, including New York City and the content that we'll post there for your enjoyment. Thank you very much for joining us here on Later Days, and maybe we'll do another one of these sometime. Good night.
Ready?